at my son's housewarming party. I handed him an envelope. He laughed, passed it to his wife without opening it, and she dropped it on the gift table between a bottle of wine and a scented candle. "Mom, you didn't have to," he said, already turning away. His wife smiled the way people smile when they're trying not to look disappointed. 3 weeks later, I got a text. "We donated it to charity. Hope that's okay." Felt like the right thing. I sat with that text for a long time. The envelope had contained a cashier's check for $40,000. But that wasn't what hurt. What hurt was the smile, the turning away, the assumption that whatever I'd brought wasn't worth a second glance. I'm 63 years old. I've been a home health aide for 31 years. I drive a 2009 Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard, and I buy my groceries on Tuesdays because the senior discount is 15%. My son has known this his whole life. He grew up watching me count quarters at the kitchen table and pack my lunch every single day because restaurants were a luxury we didn't have. He grew up knowing exactly what I was. What he didn't know was what I'd built while he wasn't looking. Before I get to that, let me tell you about the party. My son. I'll call him my son because that's what he is, though some days the word feels like it belongs to a different story. Bought a house in Westfield, Connecticut. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen with an island the size of my entire living room. His wife picked it. She picks most things. She has opinions about everything from the thread count of their sheets to which mothers belong at which events. And I had learned over 5 years of marriage that I fell somewhere in the lower category. The party was on a Saturday in April. I drove 2 hours to get there. I wore the gray dress I'd bought for my niece's graduation, pressed it the night before, ironed the collar twice. I brought a pan of my son's favorite apple cake, the one with cardamom, the recipe I'd gotten from my own mother 40 years ago, and the envelope. The house was full when I arrived. His wife's family occupied the living room in that particular way people do when they own a space. Her father was holding court near the fireplace. Her sister had claimed the window seat. A brother-in-law I'd met once was pouring wine like he lived there. I found my son in the kitchen. He hugged me quickly, the kind of hug that ends before it starts. His wife appeared at his elbow the way she always did, all perfume and precision. "You made it," she said. "Not glad you made it, just you made it," like she was confirming a fact. I set the cake on the counter. I handed my son the envelope. He looked at it the way you look at something you're not sure you want to touch. Plain white envelope, his name in my handwriting. He passed it to his wife without opening it. She set it on the gift table without reading the front. "Mom, you didn't have to," he said, and turned back to his conversation. I stood in that kitchen for another 4 hours. I ate a small plate of food. I spoke to 2 people. I drove 2 hours home in the dark with the radio off, and I thought about the envelope sitting on that table, getting buried under prettier things. 3 weeks later, the text. "We donated it to charity. Hope that's okay." Felt like the right thing. I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I stared at the ceiling for a while. My son had grown up fine. I want to be clear about that. I did not raise a bad person. I raised a person who married someone who taught him, slowly and thoroughly, that appearances were a language worth learning. That the right neighborhood and the right friends and the right way of presenting yourself mattered more than most other things. He hadn't always been like this. When he was 12, he used to sit in the passenger seat while I drove to my clients' houses, asking questions about the people I took care of. Genuinely curious. When he was 16, he helped me install a ceiling fan in the bedroom because we couldn't afford an electrician. He knew what things cost. He knew what work looked like. Then he went to college on a scholarship I'd spent 8 years helping to build. Tutoring money, overtime money, the Saturday shifts nobody else wanted, and he met her. And the version of himself he'd been slowly became embarrassing to him. Not all at once, just gradually, the way a tide goes out. You don't notice until the shore is bare. I don't blame her entirely. That would be too easy. I blame the slow drift of not paying attention to who someone is becoming. That night, after the text, I opened the drawer in my nightstand and took out a folder. Inside were things I'd never shown my son. Not because I was hiding them exactly, because he'd never asked. The folder held the deed to a property in Millbrook, New York, a 2-story house on 3/4 of an acre, purchased in 2011 for $87,000 cash. It held another deed, a duplex in Torrington, Connecticut, 2014, $112,000. It held a stack of papers from an LLC I'd formed in 2009, 2 years after my divorce, when I had $1,400 in my checking account and a client named Mrs. Hewitt who kept telling me I was smarter than I thought I was. Mrs. Hewitt was 81 years old, had worked as a real estate attorney for 40 years, and spent her last 2 good years on this earth teaching me things she said she wished someone had taught her at 30. How to read a title search, how to evaluate a property's rental potential, how to buy, distressed, repair carefully, hold long, how to build something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. When she passed, she left me $3,000 and a handwritten note that said, "You already know what to do. Stop waiting for permission." I used that $30,000 as part of the down payment on my first property. I did the rest through a home equity line I'd built on my apartment, through a credit union that believed in small investors, through 11 years of doing the work. By the night of my son's text, I owned 7 properties. Their combined value was approximately $2.3 million. I had $340,000 in a retirement account and $180,000 in a separate account I'd never touched, earmarked originally for my son for when the time was right. The $40,000 in that envelope had been a test, not a cruel one. I wasn't trying to catch him out. I was trying to understand something I needed to understand before I made a decision I couldn't take back. Now I understood it. I put the folder back in the drawer. I lay in the dark and thought about what came next. The next morning, I called a woman named Agatha. Not a friend exactly, more like someone who knew things I needed to know. She worked in property management and had handled 2 of my rentals for 6 years. I trusted her the way you trust someone who has never once given you a reason not to. "I need to make some changes," I told her, "to the Millbrook property." Agatha listened while I explained what I wanted to do. She was quiet for a moment when I finished. "That's a significant change," she said. "You're sure?" "I've been thinking about it for a while," I said. This just confirmed it. "All right, I'll start making calls." What I wanted to do was this: convert the Millbrook property, a large single-family home sitting on land that could easily support a small multi-unit building, into 4 affordable rental units, 2-bedroom apartments, below market rent, priority given to healthcare workers and home aides. People like me. People who showed up every day to care for someone else's family and couldn't afford to live in the towns where they worked. I'd been sitting on this idea for 2 years. I'd talked myself out of it twice, because the numbers required some reorganizing, because it felt too personal, too pointed. But sitting in the dark after that text message, the hesitation was gone. Some decisions clarify themselves. While Agatha started the permit process, I did something else. I called my son. He answered on the 3rd ring, a little surprised, his voice carrying that particular careful quality it had taken on in recent years, the one that meant he was calculating how to manage me. "Mom." "Hey, did you get my text about the donation?" "I did," I said. "That's actually why I'm calling. I need you to come to Millbrook next Saturday. There's something I want to show you." A pause. "What's in Millbrook?" "Property I own. I've been meaning to tell you about it for a while. Bring your wife if she's free." Another pause, longer. I could hear him recalibrating. "You own property in Millbrook?" "I own several properties," I said. "We can talk about it Saturday." He said he'd come. He sounded uncertain in a way I recognized. It was the sound of someone realizing they might have misread a situation they thought they understood completely. They arrived at noon. I was already there, standing in the front yard with Agatha and the contractor she brought to walk the property. My son got out of the car first, looked at the house, then at me, then at Agatha. His wife got out second. She was wearing the kind of weekend outfit that cost more than my monthly utilities. She looked at the house, then at me, with that same careful expression she always wore in my presence. Measuring. "This is yours?" my son said. "Bought it in 2011, I said. "Paid cash." He looked at his wife. She looked at the contractor's truck. I watched the math starting to happen behind his eyes. "I don't understand," he said. "How did you come inside?" I said. "I'll explain." We walked through the house. Agatha gave them the tour I'd asked her to give. The square footage, the current rental income from the ground floor tenant, the plans for the conversion, the projected rental structure for the 4 new units. My son was quiet the entire time. His wife asked 2 questions, both technical, both in the careful voice of someone who was recalibrating everything they thought they knew. When we got back to the front yard, my son looked at me for a long moment. "How many properties?" he asked. 7, I said. "This is the smallest one." He sat down on the porch steps. Actually sat down, like his legs had made a decision without him. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I sat down beside him. Agatha and the contractor had gone to the far side of the yard to discuss the septic system, giving us space. "I wanted to know who you'd become," I said. "Without money as a factor. I wanted to see what you valued." He was quiet for a moment. "And you donated $40,000 to charity without opening the envelope," I said. "Not because you wanted to give to charity, because it was easier than figuring out what to do with something that came from me." He didn't argue. That told me something. "The envelope," he said. "You knew we'd do that." "I thought it was possible," I said. "I hoped I was wrong." His wife had come to stand at the edge of the porch. I looked at her directly for the first time that day. "I don't have a problem with you," I said. "I want to be clear about that. But I do have a problem with what's happened to my son in the last 5 years. And I think you know what I mean." She held my gaze. I'll give her credit for that. "The 40,000, she said quietly. "Where did it come from?" "From work," I said. "The same place everything I have came from. I got up at 5 in the morning for 30 years, and I took care of other people's parents and grandparents, and I saved every dollar I could. And I invested it the way a woman I deeply respected taught me to invest it, and I built something. Not for status, not to impress anyone, because I wanted to know that the work meant something permanent." My son had his face in his hands. "I thought you were." He stopped. "You thought I was just a home health aide," I said. "Not unkind, just accurate." "I didn't think that." "You acted like it." He didn't have an answer for that. His wife sat down on the step on his other side. For once, she didn't fill the silence. "The property I'm converting," I said, "is going to house 4 families. Healthcare workers, home aides, people who can't afford to live near where they work. I'm doing it because someone did something for me a long time ago. Not the easy thing, the right thing. And I've been trying to figure out how to pay that forward for 20 years. This is how." My son looked up. His eyes were wet. I hadn't seen that in a long time. "Mom," he said, "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," I said. "I'm telling you because you're my son and I love you, and I am not willing to spend the rest of my life being the person you're a little embarrassed by. That's done." He nodded. His wife reached over and put her hand on his arm. I stood up and looked out at the yard, at the oak tree in the corner that had been there since before I bought the property, at the contractor's truck idling in the driveway. "There's something else," I said. "The account I set aside for you, the one I plan to give you eventually, I've made a decision about it." He looked at me. "I'm putting it in trust," I said. "Not as punishment. It'll still be yours. But the terms are different now. You'll receive it in 4 years if you want it. And the condition is that you spend the next 2 years working on something real. Not for money, not for me. For yourself. Something you build, not something you're handed." He was quiet for a long time. "Then, what if I don't?" "Then the trust goes to fund 2 more conversions like this one," I said. "And I'll know that was the right call." His wife made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a breath. She shook her head slowly. She's serious, she said to my son. Not with contempt, with something that sounded almost like respect. I know she is, he said. They didn't leave right away. We sat on that porch for another hour. My son asked questions he should have asked years ago. His wife listened more than she talked. At one point, she went inside to use the bathroom, and when she came back out, she looked at me differently. I can't explain it better than that. Just differently. When they left, my son hugged me in the driveway. A real hug. The kind that ends when it ends, not on a schedule. He stood there for a second after and looked at the house. I had no idea, he said. I know, I said. That's on both of us. He nodded. His wife raised her hand in something like a wave, and they got back in the car. I stood in the driveway and watched them go. Then I walked back to the porch and sat down and let the quiet settle around me. The construction started 3 weeks later. I came every Saturday, hard hat and work boots, coffee in a thermos. The foreman, a man named Crispin who'd worked conversions for 20 years, walked me through every phase. He didn't treat me like an obstacle or a curiosity. He treated me like the owner because I was. One morning, his assistant asked me, not rudely, but genuinely curious, what made me want to do a project like this. I thought about Mrs. Hewitt. I thought about her note. I thought about the morning after the text message, lying in the dark, understanding something clearly for the first time. Because the people who are going to live here do work that nobody sees, I said. And I know what that feels like. He nodded and went back to measuring. My son called 6 weeks later. He'd started volunteering with a housing nonprofit in Hartford, showing up on Saturdays to help with repairs, doing intake interviews for families on the wait list. He'd been asked to take on a part-time coordination role. I'm not getting paid, he said. I know, I said. It's not about the trust, he said. I just wanted you to know that. I believed him. I'm not certain I should have, not yet, but I did. Good, I said. Keep going. The units opened on a Thursday in September, 4 months after construction began. I didn't arrange a ceremony. No ribbon, no photographer, no speeches. Just 4 families with keys, boxes, and the particular expression people wear when something they've needed for a long time finally arrives. One of the new tenants was a woman named Berta, 57 years old, a home health aide who'd been driving 40 minutes each way to her clients because she couldn't afford to live any closer. She had a daughter in high school and a mother she was also trying to help. She stood in the doorway of her apartment and looked around for a long moment before she said anything. How long is the lease? She asked. 3 years, I said. Renewable. She nodded slowly. 3 years, she said, like it was a word in a language she hadn't heard in a while. I drove home that evening through October light, the kind that makes everything look like it's made of something warmer than it actually is. I thought about 31 years of early mornings. I thought about Mrs. Hewitt and the note she left me. I thought about my son, who was somewhere in Hartford right now doing something quiet and real. I thought about the envelope on the gift table and the text message and the long drive home in the dark. I thought about the 7 properties, the folder in the nightstand drawer, the life I'd built without ever telling anyone I was building it. There's a thing people say about invisible work, about how the people who do it disappear into the background of other people's lives. I spent 30 years disappearing like that. I learned things in those rooms, sitting with people at the end of their lives, that you can't learn anywhere else. I learned that almost no one, at the end, wishes they'd been more impressive. They wish they'd been more honest. They wish they'd built things that lasted. They wish they told the people they loved what those people actually meant to them, before it was too late to mean anything. I'm 63. I still drive the 2009 Civic. I still buy groceries on Tuesdays, but I have 7 properties and 4 families and homes they can afford and a son who is learning, slowly, what his hands are for. And somewhere in a nightstand drawer, there's a folder with his name on it, waiting for the day he's ready. The work is its own answer. It always has been. I keep thinking about Berta standing in the doorway of that apartment, asking how long the lease was. 3 years, the way she said it back to me. Slowly, like she was checking whether the word was real. That moment told me more about cause and effect than anything I could have planned or reasoned through. You do the work. You hold on. And eventually, the thing you were building for shows up in a doorway and makes it make sense. I didn't start investing because I was smart. I started because Mrs. Hewitt sat across from me at her kitchen table for 2 years and refused to let me believe I was the kind of person things didn't happen for. That was her gift to me, not the $3,000, not the note, but the insistence that I already understood more than I thought I did. Wisdom isn't something handed to you. It's something you earn in increments, usually in rooms where nobody is watching, usually when you're too tired to feel proud of yourself. I learned that from her. I tried to carry it forward. What I got wrong for a long time was silence. I thought protecting my son from the knowledge of what I had was the same as protecting him from being shaped by it. I thought if he didn't know about the money, he'd develop his own sense of what mattered. Instead, the silence became a wall I built around myself, and he drew his own conclusions from the outside. He concluded I was small. He didn't mean to. He just couldn't see past what I showed him. That's on me. I own it. But here's what I've come to understand about the way things unfold. Actions accumulate. Every choice my son made, the slow drift away, the turned back at the kitchen counter, the text about charity, those weren't cruelties. They were the natural result of someone who had stopped looking carefully at another person. And every choice I made, the early mornings, the saved dollars, the 7 properties, the 4 families in Millbrook, those accumulated too. In the end, what each of us had built was exactly what we've been building all along. The ledger is always honest, even when we aren't reading it. What brought my son back wasn't the revelation about the money. I want to be clear about that. It was the moment on the porch when he sat down and couldn't argue, when the truth was too plain to manage. That's the thing about integrity, yours or someone else's. It doesn't need volume. It just needs to be there, consistently, over time, until there's no longer any reasonable way to pretend otherwise. He's in Hartford now on Saturdays, doing something real with his hands. I don't know yet whether that lasts. That's his work to do, not mine. Persistence. The kind that isn't performed for anyone. The kind that shows up even when no one is keeping score. That's the thing I hope he's learning. I couldn't give it to him. I could only show him what it looked like over 30 years and hope that eventually he'd recognize it. The work is quiet, the results are slow, but they're honest. And at 63, sitting in the driveway of a property I bought with overtime money and the belief that the work meant something, I can tell you that honest is the only thing that holds.